Hello. Hopefully all of you got an email with a link to the committee you're on or the office that you're fulfilling. And it was to help you get your feet in the door, start looking at what you will need to do for the bill. Let me pull up the groups again. So starting at the top in the executive branch, Keeley, I sent you a direct link to Biden's goals on, I think, education. And so it's just to kind of give you an idea to see kind of what his vision was for public education. And you'll have to do some digging to see if he mentioned anything about dietary needs for public education. And so Elijah, Olivia, and Alyssa, I wanted to let you guys know, I think I said on Monday that you will work separately, but you three actually go ahead and work together. Now, the links that I sent you, you'll want to look up yourself. Like Elijah, you want to look up that link about the Secretary of Agriculture. You want to kind of know, because you're going to be asking the question, what does agriculture have to do with gluten-free? And so when we talk about gluten-free, anybody in any of the classes have a gluten allergy? Our daughter is gluten-free, so I'm very familiar with it, or it has to be gluten-free. And so usually you hear about you can't eat wheat. But it's a lot broader than that. And so what you're going to do, Elijah, is you're going to want to look for farms, companies, ag companies that produce gluten-free products, and probably look for the best fit for a public school setting. One way you can help yourself a lot, Elijah, is go to a store and ask if they have a gluten-free section. And if they do, even like Walmart's now have a gluten-free section. It's a small section, but just look at some of the labels, and there'll be some that are just straightforward. We are gluten-free, and there are no, there is nothing produced in our factory that has nuts or anything that might contaminate it. And then you have some labels that will say we're gluten-free, but we do have nuts and wheat products in our factory. So you want to look for the best producers of gluten-free products from the ag field. Olivia, being the Secretary of Education, looking at that person's goals, how will that office affect the dietary menus and standards for public education? And then Alyssa, Secretary of Health and Human Services, you're going to be similar to Bryce, I'm sorry, Elijah. But you're going to want to focus more on not just gluten-free, but people who have nut allergies, people who might be lactose intolerant. And even within that field of lactose, milk products, dairy, for example, our son has a casein allergy, which casein is something that is in milk. And you can go to Brahms and you can now buy their A2 milk, which is casein free. So, I mean, things are really getting more and more detailed about dietary issues. So those of you in the executive branch, look at your real life counterparts, kind of see how they structured their goals, and then and what their responsibilities are, and then knowing what that is, taking the bill or the proposal, start working out what you would want to see in a bill. And then as you three work together as three secretaries, you'll want to come up with a comprehensive goal for dietary standards in public schools when it comes to allergies. So I hope that helps you guys, give you a little bit more direction. I understand that it might be hard finding information. Just do your best. But let it be more detailed than we want to be gluten-free for our gluten-free students. Okay, so but again, think of me as your all-knowing supreme leader who you can always shoot emails or texts and ask for advice. Those of you on the committees, which I'm going to bring up right now, has Brendy Joe left yet? She did, right?
Yes, she left.
Okay, so there's nobody on the Education and Workforce Committee, so I'll do them last. But do we have Taylor and Gabrielle for the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Senate?
Yes.
Taylor's here.
Taylor, okay. And
And
then,
Adriana and Taylor.
oh, Adriana, I thought Adriana's gonna be gone.
So, yeah.
Oh yeah, she's leaving.
Okay, so there's nobody here also on the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry.
Sarah.
Oh,
Sarah
Sarah's-
Skelton here.
Okay,
I'm not gonna be here for much longer though. Like we're all about to have to leave, but I can
Okay.
whatever I need to say. I'll stay in here for.
I'll start with you.
Okay.
So what you and Jonathan and Grace are going to want to do is, you'll notice that in your committee, it touches on two things that are relevant to this proposed bill: agriculture and nutrition. So you guys are going to work on basically what agricultural companies would be eligible to work with public education school systems.
Okay, so like what food things would be able to send to schools, like the food trucks and stuff like that, like those kind of companies?
Yeah, but even more detailed, like, are you going to want to allow a company that also has nuts in their factory or wheat dust? Are you going to want to let them, or are you going to want to go to a strictly gluten-free, allergy-free company? So that kind of thing.
Okay.
Let me see, Adriana, has she left?
Yes, she just did.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it and it'll be recorded for them. So Taylor, Adriana, well, let me just back up. Jonathan and Grace. The thing that I just shared with Sarah about the Ag and Nutrition and Forestry Committee, you need to take note of, and I did send you a link to that, the present committee. So you'll want to go to that link and read about them and what they do, so you'll kind of have an idea. You guys are going to work so that you will propose a bill. You guys are gonna, whereas the executive branch is just coming up with like personal goals, you three committees in the legislative branch are all going to craft a proposed bill on for this Regal Charter School with the money that's been donated. Also trying to figure out how many students are gluten-free, how many students have nut allergies, how many students have to be lactose-free. You're going to propose a bill that's going to be strong in your area. And then it's going to be the same way for the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee that has Taylor, Adriana, and Gabrielle. You guys are going to focus on the health and the education part. So angle that you guys might look at, Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. In the education area, you guys might search for studies. Students that have allergies, if they don't have the kind of food that they need, does it affect their learning? You're going to want to look at those kind of angles. And so this will also apply to the Education and Workforce House Committee that is composed of Ella, Brendy, Joe, and Morgan. You guys are going to want to focus on the education aspect. And even though it's the same as the other committee, you're a House committee, they're a Senate committee. You guys will present your proposed bills on Monday, November 8th. So you still have over a week for me to work with you and help you tweak and summarize and kind of get clearly defined in what you want to do. Also on November 8th, by that time, Keely and Bryce will have had their goals laid out, specifically by next week. Elijah, Olivia, and Alyssa will have their strategy. And then you five will be meeting next week, since those three secretaries are a part of the cabinet. And on November 8th, you all will present basically a executive branch vision and strategy for students in public schools that have allergies. What you want to see. And so once those are all presented on Monday, November 8th, the three committees in the legislative branch will now know what they'll need to do to continue to tweak and adjust their bills now that they will know what the executive branch wants. Because the goal is they will send a unified bill that hopefully President Keeley will not veto. Now, if we don't get all the details and all the information just perfect, that's okay. The main point is we're learning the process of how something becomes law. So I hope that gave a little bit more clarity and direction Do you have any questions that might have just came to your mind? Because now we're going to jump into and finish the chapter 12 material of the presidency. Because this is what's going to go down in the next 5 days. Monday, we will meet and work on group project. I will save the last 15 minutes to share with you what to look for on the test. And then Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week is the test period. So we're just about on test 3. Capiche? You guys fans of Full House? Or maybe the newer sequel, Fuller House? Can y'all hear me out there? Capiche was the catchphrase of Uncle Jesse. Were you gonna say something, Bryce?
What is it?
He was asking.
I don't know the catchphrase of Uncle Jesse. I know Michelle's.
Oh, Michelle said Capiche too.
And then Stephanie's, how rude. That's all I
Yeah,
know.
There it
Yeah,
is.
Yeah, no, I knew that one.
John Stamos, who plays Uncle Jesse, his hair is about as good as mine.
Right.
All righty. Well, I hope you got to watch the 2 short videos that I posted. I had to be gone Wednesday to, now please forgive me, our church had to feed college students at Eastern College in Wilburton. So I hope you'll forgive me, but every Wednesday, a local church feeds the students at the Baptist Center. So I was there hanging with those students, and hope you got to watch the 2 short videos of drive-by history with Mr. Craig. Hope you enjoyed those. He's about as funny as me. So if you didn't, you'll want to watch them. He covered the powers of the president that are laid out in the Constitution, and I will just quickly share with you that you will want to know these 5 powers of the president or the executive branch that are in the Constitution, and begin on page 476. So you want to make sure you read those and read the sections that go with them, and underline and highlight and have that ready to go for the test. What we are going to cover and finish up today is the section that begins on page 489, the presidency as an institution. But before we look at that, let me give a brief little mini lecture on how the presidency has evolved in the 240 years that we've been a nation. When our Constitution was written, the founders envisioned an executive branch with one person as the executive. And our first president, of course, was Washington. And I believe that he had either 3 or 5 what we would call today cabinet members. He had Alexander Hamilton as his Secretary of Treasury. He had Thomas Jefferson as his Secretary of State. I wanted to say he had 3, but the point is, it was Washington and a few secretaries that made up his cabinet. And the first stage of the evolution of the presidency is from Washington to James Monroe. And all of them served for 2 terms except for John Adams. Now, remember, this was before it was a constitutional amendment that presidents could only serve 2 terms. What George Washington did is, after his 2nd term, he voluntarily stepped down because he believed in that vision of the founders, that we don't want the presidency to evolve into a monarchy. What was going to make America different was there was going to be no king, because we wanted to break away from that tyrant King George, and we did not want another monarchy in America. So Washington voluntarily steps down, and that's a pretty historic moment in 1796. One leader of a country voluntarily steps down so that the new leader can take power. It's a peaceful transfer of power. And so Washington, his example was followed until FDR. The presidents in this stage all were very active in independence, or in the movement for independence, and so that's why they were willing to step down. This was a time where only well-respected and qualified, what was considered the most qualified individuals, were elected. In other words, they were fit to rule. And all of them exercised considerable constraint compared to today's presidents, in that they use their powers modestly. They only focused on the powers that were clearly expressed in the Constitution. Now, Thomas Jefferson's leadership in the Louisiana Purchase could be considered, I believe, a stretch of those expressed powers. But overall, the first stage of the presidency were well-respected, we would say the elite men of society who used their power very modestly. With Andrew Jackson, there was a change in the expansion of the powers of the presidency. He issued more vetoes than all the presidents before him combined. He instituted what was called the spoils system. In other words, to the victor goes the spoils. And so he promoted a lot of his friends into positions of leadership. He ignored the Supreme Court when it came to Indian removal. So kind of breaking off the restraints of the judicial branch. Congress strikes back. 100-year period, which included President Lincoln. This kind of reestablishes more power back into Congress or on the legislative branch. Some of the stronger presidents during this time were Lincoln during the Civil War, which is understandable. Teddy Roosevelt, our man Teddy, he believed in talk softly and walk softly and carry a big stick. In other words, try to get things done without force, but if you have to use force, make sure it's a big stick. President Wilson, a lot of times presidential power was flashed during this time because of presidents who had strong personalities, like Teddy Roosevelt. And then since FDR, the presidency has continued to evolve as a result of crises like World War II, the Cold War with Russia, Korean conflict, Vietnam conflict, Desert Storm. These times of warfare and crisis was an open door for presidents to continue to see their power increase. With Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, it was a big turning point because Roosevelt believed the presidency, you should use it as a bully pulpit. That is, use it to get things done. And after that time, the presidency continued to grow in power because of warfare type of things. One of the key things from the Vietnam era with President Johnson, and you might want to look it up sometime, is the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. I believe around 1968, President Johnson asked Congress basically for blanket power to declare war if something happened. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution. So the question is if the Constitution hasn't changed, why has presidential power increased? How did we go from one man and a few cabinet members to, as we're going to see in a moment, thousands upon thousands of people in a bureaucracy? Well, things that have happened that have led to this increase in power is a more unified office. Unified out of all of the elements, because even when you had agencies and an increase in cabinet members, you would still have a strong president, and he would kind of be at the front, the head, and lead. But now you're seeing more of a unity of all of these agencies and advisors and bureaucracies and cabinets, and the president might not be a strong personality. For example, a Jimmy Carter. but it's more of a team approach. So character and personality, not just the president's character and personality, but some of their team members. Our society is a lot more complex than it was in the 1780s, right? Not only is society more complex, but there's a lot more people. Congress has delegated more authority to the executive office. We live in a time of mass media. And so, you know, there are strategists in the executive office who try to strategize and use the media to increase presidential power. And then there's a global element because our world is more globally connected because of media, because of advances in technology for travel, and because of our interdependence between nations on the global market, right? You guys, I think if you weren't familiar, I mentioned all of the barges that are off the coast of California and off the East Coast sitting out there in the oceans with all of those goods. That's affecting the economy, both the national economy and the global economy. So all these things are kind of factors in why the presidential power has increased. All right, so we want to look at these last few minutes, the presidency as an institution. This begins on page 489 in your textbook. When we talk about the executive branch now, we're talking about, of course, the president himself. I can't say herself yet because we haven't had a woman president yet, but I think we probably will. But the president, and so we'll say themselves for now. The president will have a White House staff usually made up of here you're going to find the people that are closest personally to the president. Friends. In the presidency of Trump, there was family members, right? Ivanka Trump, her husband Jared, they were on the White House staff. They were close advisors to President Trump. Your White House staff is going to be people who are directly responsible to the president. Usually it's around 400 people. Then you're going to have the cabinet. I did not have a slide with the cabinet. The cabinet is made up of, if you want to look, there's a chart, a really handy chart on 489. There are 15 departments that are in the cabinet, like the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Education, and then there's a secretary over every department. And these secretaries are basically, they meet. Oh, there it is. There's my slide on the cabinet. They meet with the president. These are major bureaucratic departments. The cabinet is not mentioned in the Constitution. Each president nominates who they want to be the secretaries of these departments. Now, even though they are not mentioned in the Constitution and they work outside of Congress, Congress can and does have control, some control over the bureaucracy by giving them advice. Since 1939, we've had the Executive Office of the Presidency, or the EOP, established by Franklin Roosevelt. This is an important circle of advisors to the president who lead agencies like the National Security Council, the Council of, or the Office of Management and Budget. That's a big one, if not the biggest agency in the executive office. And these persons that staff these agencies are only responsible to the president. Each of the agencies has between 1,500 and 2,000 members. So with the cabinet, which the smallest department in the cabinet has 4,200 members. And then I believe it's the Department of Agriculture has like 700,000. With the cabinet and with the executive office, we're already up into multiple hundreds of thousands of people in the executive branch. Not all directly, but kind of in an indirect way. Here's how the executive office of the president is broken down. These are the key offices. In that, you include the White House staff and the vice president. All are offices of the executive office of the presidency. Here's another chart breaking it down. Into three areas: political offices, support services, and policy offices. You guys kind of know about the vice president. I think they replace the president if they die. They preside, as we talked about. They are the president over the Senate, and they break any tie votes. They do not have a lot of power. And a lot of times the vice president does things for the president that will help the president have a presence somewhere, but can't be there personally. So that's kind of the presidency as an institution. I think the slide also included the first lady, which we can't forget her. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Oh, there it is. The first lady also a lot of times has her own issues. So this is the makeup of the presidential establishment or institution. You'll want to be familiar with those elements. The modern presidency is the current stage of the evolution of the presidency. It started with FDR. FDR was very aggressive, but he had to be because they were in the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. And so he instituted a lot of social programs. We know one still today is Social Security. A key precedent that he set that we still hear today is, I'm going to do this in my first 100 days. You guys remember that next year when the election runoff starts getting ramped up. You'll hear candidates talk about, what I'm going to do in my first 100 days is this, 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 and this. After FDR, here's what some of the modern presidents have done. Eisenhower expanded the military branch. Out of that era came the term, the military industrial complex. He also led the way in the birth of the interstate highway system. For example, eventually in Oklahoma, we have I-40 going through our state, east and west, and I-35 going north and south. The interstate highway system. Through Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, we got Medicare and Medicaid and a lot of voting rights. Even though Reagan talked about government being smaller and government is the problem, during his time, there was a lot of expansion, growth of the military. There was an invasion of Grenada without congressional approval. Clinton took military action in Somalia and bombed Kosovo without Congress's approval. Remember, Congress is the one that has to declare war. But Reagan and Clinton entered into military conflicts without congressional approval. Under George Bush II's leadership and presidency, there was more growth of the military. There was growth of the intelligence community, especially against terrorism, and an increase in national security, with President Obama dealing with a national economic crisis and also introducing health care for all. These two slides talk about the direct type of power that presidents can have. It's the last section in your book, starting on 496. That might be something like a bonus question. What I want to leave you with is there are basically three models of presidential power throughout our history. The first group believed in kind of being restricted. Presidents only use the power that they're granted by the Constitution. Then with Roosevelt, and around that time, they saw the presidency as a stewardship, where you represented the nation and you were to act as a steward on behalf of the nation. And so sometimes, while the Constitution might not say it, the Constitution doesn't restrict you from doing things. And then the prerogative model, when the nation is in danger, presidents must take action regardless of legality. Abraham Lincoln dealing with the secession of the South. So, any questions on that, on the presidency? Have a great weekend. I am going to post for your enjoyment the original 13-minute video of Michael Jackson's Thriller as you celebrate the spooky Halloween holiday this weekend. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.